Welcome back to Dreamland Encounters. We're glad you're here tonight. Volume 5 of Fall Asleep to the Unheard explores overlooked reports and forgotten encounters that return in whispers. In November 1977, a peculiar event unfolded on Calares, a small fishing island in Brazil's Pará state. The island's usual calm, marked by lapping water, insect hums, and faint voices drifting from windows, have been disrupted. For weeks, residents have been talking about strange lights. These weren't ordinary phenomena. They crossed the sky, hovered low over houses, and shined narrow beams at people. The locals called them chupa, meaning sucker, because the beams seemed to drain energy from those they touched. The Brazilian Air Force was watching. A discreet intelligence service detachment was stationed nearby, officially monitoring atmospheric phenomena. Operation Saucer, as it was codenamed, remained mysterious. Uniformed personnel kept to themselves, equipped with cameras, notebooks, and field gear, observing from the town's edges. That evening, the air was thick and humid. Electricity flickered as it often did in Calares. Residents were on it. Lights had been appearing more frequently, and many no longer ventured out after sunset. Fisherman Antonio de Costa sat on a low stool outside his house, mending a net by kerosene lamplight. Nearby, shopkeeper Maria Lucia Rivero locked her store, scanning the water's horizon. Just after dark, a bright, solid light appeared from the northeast, moving silently over the river toward the island. Initially, it could be mistaken for an aircraft, but its approach was different. The light grew larger, slowing to hover just above the shoreline. From the sand, it looked several meters across, a pale amber glow with a faint disc-like outline. Two smaller lights separated from the main glow, drifting in different directions. They moved with an impossible precision, changing height and direction in ways no fishing boat, lamp, or helicopter could replicate. If one follows you into your dreams, share it when you wake. Thin, almost solid beams began to shine down, moving with calculated precision. Their impact was immediate and strange. Radios burst into static when a beam passed over a house roof, and nearby building lights flickered and dimmed when another swept low across a street. On the beach, Antonio stood to get a better view. Suddenly, the beam turned toward him. A focused heat pressed against his chest, like a hot coin held firmly. His hands went slack, and the net fell to the ground. He sat down not from panic, but from an unexpected deep weakness. Later, a small circular mark would reveal where the beam had touched him. From her veranda, Maria watched as one of the smaller lights glided between two palm trees. She could make out a dome-like curve at the top. The beam moved over a chicken coop, causing the birds to erupt in noise before falling suddenly silent, as if something beyond fear had stopped them. The island was alive with confusion. Shouts echoed through streets as people called to neighbors. Some rushed indoors, pulling curtains tight, while others stood frozen at gates and doorways. Smaller lights moved independently, sliding between houses before rejoining the main craft over the beach. A stationed Air Force team observed through long-lens cameras and binoculars. Their orders were clear: observe, not engage. Static burst through their radios with each beam passage, forcing them to communicate through hand signals. The island's electricity became increasingly unstable, with some houses losing power for minutes at a time. The craft's glow now outshone every other light. Its beams moved deliberately, tracing careful lines as if searching for something specific. At least 2 people were directly struck. That night, Antonio experienced a chest burn accompanied by a deep fatigue that prevented him from working. The next day, another man returning from the docks reported similar symptoms: heat on his neck and a strange metallic taste in his mouth. Both described a sensation unlike any injury they had previously experienced. It wasn't painful, but a heavy weakness that lingered. After approximately 20 minutes, the craft shifted position, tilting slightly before rising higher into the sky. They moved toward open water together, smoothly departing with no sound or acceleration until lost against the darkness beyond the river's mouth. That night, several victims visited the small municipal clinic where Dr. Spurr Michael videos mouth. That night, several victims visited the small municipal clinic. Welid Satim Carvalho carefully examined their marks. The wounds were small round burns with clean edges, sometimes accompanied by nearby pinprick marks. She documented each case methodically, recording unusual symptoms like headaches, dizziness, and anemia-like conditions in otherwise healthy adults. The skin around these marks was tender but not blistered, and the wounds healed without infection. She recorded her observations without speculating on their origin. Air Force personnel quietly returned to the beach the next morning, collecting soil and water samples using metal cases and simple tools. They worked without speaking to anyone, departing by midday. Weeks later, local residents discovered the lights had been tracked on radar at Bam Air Base, moving at speeds and altitudes incompatible with conventional aircraft. The data, including photographs taken by the Air Force team, was filed away. When portions of operational files were declassified in 2004, sketches of the craft emerged alongside witness testimonies from carriers. Some described a large disk accompanied by smaller lights, beams causing heat and weakness, and electrical interference in homes and radios. Official language remained neutral, describing only unidentified aerial phenomena with reported physiological effects. For the islanders, such mysterious events were familiar. The Chupa Chupa wave had been building for weeks and would continue, but this particular evening stood out due to its widespread impact and proximity. The military's decision to document without intervening raised numerous questions. Why were the beams so precisely targeted? What determined who was struck? Why did trained personnel on the ground choose not to act? Antonio's chest mark faded after several days, but the memory of sudden weakness lingered. Maria spoke of the sighting only when directly asked, preferring to recall the quiet moments before the mysterious glow appeared. Dr. Carvalho preserved her notes, which would later be referenced by researchers investigating the incident. The lavender fields of Valensole, nestled in the Provence Alps, held their quiet secrets on that July morning in 1965. Rows of violets stretched towards distant low hills, buzzing softly with bees under the morning sun. Maurice Massa, a local farmer and former wartime resistance radio operator, walked his familiar route through the lavender on July 1st when something unusual caught his eye. From a distance, he thought it might be a vehicle, something that occasionally happened with lost motorists or military training crews. But as he approached, the shape was unlike any truck or tractor. About 200 feet away, details crystallized. The smooth oval craft, roughly the size of a small car, rested on 4 thin landing struts. Its surface was a dull metallic gray, with no markings, seams, or windows. Nearby, 2 small figures moved among the lavender plants. No taller than 4 feet, they wore tight-fitting, one-piece suits matching the craft's muted tone. Their heads were disproportionately large and completely bald, faces pale and expressionless. They appeared to be carefully examining the plants, bending slightly at the waist. Massa initially thought they wore some kind of protective gear, though no breathing apparatus was visible. When one figure noticed him, it turned slightly and signaled to its companion. In that moment, Massa experienced an odd chest pressure and an overwhelming heaviness that locked him in place. His arms remained frozen at his sides. Years later, no marker would commemorate this encounter. No plaque would remind the town of that night when the sky came close. The only records existed in Air Force files, medical clinic notes, and the stories carried by those who witnessed the event. The official documentation remained brief. Questions lingered, and the memory of that hovering disc, flanked by smaller lights, belonged to those who watched it move over the shore and felt its attention fall upon them. But his legs were frozen. He could see and breathe, but any attempt to move failed completely. The 2 beings showed no visible signs of concern, moving with deliberate calm toward their craft. A small hatch seamlessly integrated into the hull opened silently. They climbed inside, and the hatch sealed instantly behind them. The craft then lifted straight upward, without dust or wind, accelerating silently until it vanished from sight. The moment it disappeared, Mass's paralysis ended. His legs nearly gave out, and he stood catching his breath before approaching the spot where the craft had been. A perfect circular area, about 2 meters across, flattened the lavender. Plants bent outward from the center, with 4 shallow depressions marking where landing struts had touched the ground. These areas were compressed and unusually dry. Mass returned home and told his wife about the encounter. He then went to inform the local Jeremy. By early afternoon, 2 officers arrived at the site. They photographed the impressions collected soil samples, and took a formal statement from Mass. He described the craft and its occupants precisely, avoiding speculation. That same day, the GMRE filed an official incident report. They noted the circular depression with 4 symmetrical landing traces, vegetation flattened outward, and included Mass's detailed sketch of the craft and beings. The following morning, additional visitors arrived, plainclothes men with official credentials. They asked Mass to walk them through his route and recount the event. After examining the site for over an hour and collecting more soil and plant samples, they left without comment. Within a week, Mass began noticing unusual effects. The lavender within the landing circle grew more slowly than surrounding plants, with faintly discolored leaves. Even more curious, his beard growth slowed on the side of his face most exposed to the craft, a change that persisted for weeks. News of the incident spread quickly through Provence. Local newspapers reported on the farmer who saw beings in the lavender, and regional outlets sent reporters to Valensole. Throughout it all, Mass remained measured, refusing to embellish or speculate about the origin of what he had witnessed. Wartime service and his long-standing village reputation bolstered Jean-Marie Massa's credibility. When he reported an extraordinary encounter, the incident caught attention far beyond the local region. French archives meticulously preserved photographs, sketches, and soil analysis results that revealed unusual dehydration patterns unexplainable by typical weather conditions or standard plant stress. After 1977, these files were transferred to DOHUL, GPAN, the official French space agency unit dedicated to investigating unidentified aerospace phenomena. GPAN's later summaries highlighted the Valence incident as one of France's most compelling close encounters, citing physical trace evidence and Massa's trustworthiness. Independent researchers visited Massa over the years, finding his account consistently unchanged. He continued farming his lavender fields, always remembering the exact spot of his experience. Investigators were particularly intrigued by the being's apparent agricultural focus. Massa had observed them touching and closely inspecting plants. Some researchers speculated they might be gathering samples, while others suggested the location was simply a convenient landing site. Massa himself remained uncertain about their purpose, only noting they departed as calmly as they arrived. By the late 1970s, the Valence case appeared in multiple European UFO catalogues, often alongside similar encounters. What distinguished this event was its lack of dramatic elements: no noise, no chase, no subsequent skylights. Instead, it was a brief, silent interaction leaving tangible soil traces. Years later, in a rare interview, Massa reflected on the moment. They did not try to speak, and I felt no fear until after they were gone. I was more surprised than anything. It was like watching something not meant for human understanding. Today, the landing site blends indistinguishably with the surrounding lavender fields, the plants cycling through their seasonal rhythms. Yet the original file, complete with Massa's sketches and photographs, remains preserved in the National Archives. GPN's continued analysis ensures the Valence incident remains part of a select group of significant European UFO encounters. Not Copley Woods, nestled on the edge of suburban Coventry, West Midlands, England, is a place locals know well during daylight but tend to avoid after dark. Dense oaks and beeches create a landscape of twisting paths, low brambles, and damp hollows where light struggles to penetrate. In spring 1978, Eric Marston, the local groundskeeper who had been locking woodland gates for nearly a decade, was completing his routine patrol. Every fence post and rail bend was familiar to him. Nothing suggested this evening would be different until he noticed an unusual white glow beyond the trees. Simultaneously, Linda Holt and Peter Crawley were walking their dogs along the main east path. Their animals' reactions were immediate and stark. The collie froze with ears flat, while the Labrador strained to pull away. A pale sphere, approximately 6 or 7 meters across, hovered above the treetops. As Marston moved closer, he observed the object's remarkable characteristics. Perfectly round and emitting a contained glow, it pulsed slowly. A thin beam projected from its underside, sweeping across grass and tree trunks and momentarily rendering bark translucent. The atmosphere took on a charged quality reminiscent of an impending thunderstorm. The sphere's movements were deliberate. After scanning the area, it rose slightly, paused, and then shot vertically into the sky with unexpected speed, leaving no trail. Upon investigating the clearing, Marston discovered a nearly perfect circle of flattened grass approximately 8 meters wide. Notably, the soil remained warm to the touch, despite the cruel night air. This incident remains both well documented and unexplained. Researchers continue to grapple with fundamental questions. Why would beings capable of immobilizing a human spend time among lavender rows? And what could they have been seeking? For Marston, the memory was unshakable, not from fear, but from a quiet certainty that something truly unknown had stood among his plants. During those brief minutes on that July morning, residents near Copley Woods reported strange lights one night, prompting a response from West Midlands Police. When officers arrived, they found a clearing with flattened grass and warm soil. One officer touched the ground directly, noting its unusual heat. Their report highlighted these ground conditions but found no evidence of campfires or combustion. The following morning, Marston discovered a small team already at the site. A Ministry of Defense representative briefly identified himself before asking Marston to step back. The team photographed the area, collected soil and bark samples, and marked several trees with chalk. Later that day, witnesses Holt and Cowley were interviewed separately. Their accounts were strikingly similar. A pale spherical object hovering above the trees, projecting a narrow beam and moving away at high speed without making a sound. Holt described a glass-like effect on the trees, while Cowley emphasized how the air seemed to stop moving. No official statement came from the Ministry of Defense. The local newspaper ran a short piece suggesting the marks might be from camping activity, a claim Marston privately disputed. In the weeks that followed, Marston noticed changes in the clearing. Grass regrew more slowly within the marked area, and several trees displayed unusual pale streaks along their bark, with sap leaking at an odd time of year. Holt mentioned her dog would not go near that part of the path for months. Decades later, under the Freedom of Information Act, portions of a Ministry of Defense intelligence staff file were released. A March 1978 entry referenced the Copley Woods incident, noting a luminous spherical phenomenon observed by multiple witnesses, including trained personnel. The document mentioned animal agitation, ground heat, and beam activity. Witness sketches matched the descriptions provided by Marston, Holt, and Cowley. While soil analysis results were redacted, a marginal note read, "Trace elements unusual." Further analysis required classified. An internal covering letter suggested filing the event under UAP with no defense significance, a standard phrase used to close cases without formal investigation. Whether more detailed findings exist in a classified annex remains a mystery. For Marston, the night left an indelible mark. He rarely discussed. It was something else entirely. Lubby Knot Copley Woods near Coventry in the West Midlands, marks where suburban houses give way to a tangle of oak, ash and bramble. At day, it's just another patch of woodland. Night transforms it into a place locals hesitate to explore. Eric Marston knew this terrain intimately. As groundskeeper, he had walked the perimeter for almost a decade, locking gates and checking for campers or vandals. His routine rarely varied, just the occasional remnants of teenage gatherings or small campfires. One spring evening in 1978 would shatter that predictability. As Marston approached the north gate, a pale glow filtered through the trees ahead. Initially, he assumed it might be car headlights, but no road existed in that direction. The light shifted, moving toward a familiar clearing where fallen branches often collected. At roughly the same moment, Linda Holt and Peter Queeley were walking their dogs along the eastern path. Something triggered an immediate animal response. Holt's collie froze, ears pinned back, while Queeley's Labrador whined and strained against its lead. Neither human could see what had alarmed their dogs, but intangible stillness descended. From his vantage point, Marston observed a distinct shape emerging. This wasn't diffuse light, but a solid, spherical object, faintly glowing. It moved deliberately through the treetops before descending into the clearing. When fully visible, Marston halted. The sphere measured 6 or 7 meters across, its surface a uniform pale white that seemed to contain light internally rather than emit it. A narrow column projected from its underside. Holt and Crawley would later speak with purpose. "I came here for a reason," he'd say. Avoiding speculation, but the grass has grown back, but for those who know the story, Walking into its center still evokes an inexplicable unease, as if something once touched down briefly and departed without explanation. Night, light swept sharply across the clearing in smooth, deliberate arcs. From between the branches, Holt and Cowley watched the object, later describing it as glass-like and lit from inside with no visible seams or openings. The light beam didn't behave like a typical torch. Instead, it remained precisely where it was pointed. Marston approached closer, stopping about 20 meters from the object at the tree line. Complete silence surrounded the scene. No engine noise, no hum, just the faint rustle of branches. As the beam passed across the clearing's far edge and lingered briefly before sweeping toward the trees, something unusual happened. Wherever the light touched, the bark seemed to brighten subtly, as if reacting to its presence. After approximately a minute, the sphere rose 1 or 2 meters, paused momentarily, and then shot straight upward at an extraordinary speed. Its departure was instantaneous, from total stillness to vanishing into the sky without leaving any trail. When Marston entered the clearing, he discovered the grass flattened in an almost perfect 8-meter circle. The soil felt warm beneath his boots, a strange contrast to the cool evening air. Minutes later, Holt and Cowley met him at the main gate. They simultaneously described the same pale sphere and its strange scanning beam. A resident who had witnessed the light from her upstairs window contacted the police, and within 20 minutes, 2 West Midlands constables arrived. They examined the clearing, touched the soil, and noted the lack of burn marks or debris. One officer remarked on the ground's warmth but absence of fire signs before filing a brief report. The following morning, Marston returned to investigate. 3 men in plain clothes were already there, photographing the clearing and collecting soil and bark samples. One briefly showed an identification card, identifying them as Ministry of Defense personnel. They marked several trees with chalk and conversed quietly, completely disregarding Marston's questions. Within an hour, they departed without explanation. That same day, Holt and Cowley were interviewed separately. Their accounts remained consistent: a silent, glowing sphere, a scanning beam, and an abrupt vertical departure. Holt reiterated the object's glass-like quality, while Cowley emphasized the unnerving stillness of the air during the sighting. In the subsequent week, Marston observed that grass within the flattened circle regrew more slowly than the surrounding vegetation. On in the clearing at Copley Woods, tree trunks bore vertical streaks of pale bark. Local wildlife behaved strangely. Holt's dog refused to enter the area, pulling away each time they approached. Local media coverage was minimal, with the Coventry Evening Telegraph running a short piece attributing marks to camping activity, quoting an unnamed police source. The incident faded quickly from casual conversation, seemingly forgotten. Years later, with the gradual release of Ministry of Defense UFO files under the UK's Freedom of Information Act, the case resurfaced. A Defense Intelligence Staff file from March 1978 contained a critical entry: Copley Woods, Coventry, visual observation of luminous spherical phenomenon by multiple witnesses including trained personnel, noted animal agitation, residual ground heat, narrow beam activity. No conventional source identified. 3 sketches accompanied the file, one from Marston, one from Holt, and one from Copley, all depicting a smooth sphere with a single downward-directed beam. The soil analysis page was heavily redacted, but a handwritten note in the margin read, "Trace elements unusual. Further analysis required. Classified." A subsequent internal letter recommended filing the case under UAP no defense significance, a term often used to quietly close investigations. For Marston, the memory remained vivid. Though rarely discussing it publicly, he once told a neighbor, "It wasn't random. I came here for a reason." Holt and Crawley remained similarly silent, yet both maintained conviction about what they'd witnessed. Today, Copley Woods has changed. The clearing is overgrown, the original circle long vanished. Only those familiar with the story could pinpoint the exact location. In official records, the incident is reduced to a few sparse lines, stripped of context and detail. For the 3 witnesses in 1978, the experience was far more profound. Something came, scanned, and left, with no explanation ever provided. The mystery of the Tully nesting would echo similar unexplained encounters in the years to follow. Weeds surrounded Padley as he drove his tractor, when suddenly something caught his attention. A forceful rush of sound broke the countryside silence. This wasn't like any noise he'd heard before. Not an engine or wind moving through trees, Looking up toward the source, Pedley spotted movement above the lagoon. A metallic disc, roughly car-sized, rose vertically from the water, and reads its motion was smooth and controlled, without wobbling, as if guided by an invisible track. The surface gleamed a dull bluish silver, completely lacking wings, propellers, or visible seams. The object cleared the surrounding vegetation, tilted slightly, and then accelerated away at an angle, vanishing without leaving a trail. Its rushing noise faded quickly, replaced by an eerie stillness. Pedley stopped his tractor and approached the lagoon. The site where the object had risen was immediately distinctive. A perfect circular patch, about 30 feet across, had been flattened into the water. The reeds were pressed down in a precise spiral, their roots still embedded in the muddy bottom. Remarkably, no plants appeared broken or torn, and the water inside the circle was unnaturally calm compared to the rippling edges beyond. To his surprise, the reeds felt warm to the touch, despite being in the shade moments earlier. At the outer edge, they stood upright and undisturbed, creating a clean border between flattened and untouched growth. Pedley knew the swamp well enough to recognize this wasn't typical livestock or boat damage. The circular pattern looked deliberate. He drove to a phone and called the local police station. Constable Ted Harbour arrived soon after to inspect the site. While Harbour had seen crop damage before, this formation was different. He noted the symmetry, the lack of broken stems, and the distinct spiral pattern. Given the unusual nature of what he was seeing, Harbour decided it warranted reporting beyond the local level. By day's end, the Royal Australian Air Force had been informed. The next morning, a small team from the Townsville base arrived, equipped with cameras, measuring tools, and sample kits. Flight Lieutenant Brett led the inspection, overseeing the recording of dimensions, orientation, and reed pattern. Photographers were taken from multiple angles, including aerial shots. 9 light aircraft pilots rarely witness strange events, but George Pedley's encounter was anything but ordinary. On a summer day near the lagoon, he observed something extraordinary. A circular craft rising silently from the water, leaving behind a precisely defined impression. Within minutes of the sighting, Pedley investigated the location. Investigators later measured the diameter at just over 32 feet, noting the area's unusual characteristics. Samples of soil, water, and plant material were carefully collected, sealed, and labeled for analysis. Critically, the team's notes, later revealed in declassified files, highlighted some peculiar details. The plant roots remained completely intact and embedded in the mud, suggesting no external manipulation. A sustained uniform pressure seemed responsible for the bending, though no scorch marks were present. Pedley's description remained consistently clear throughout subsequent interviews. He described a circular craft with a slight dome, lifting silently except for an initial rushing sound. The object rose directly from the lagoon, and he reached the site quickly. In subsequent weeks, the formation in the reeds remained visible. Plants gradually repositioned themselves, but the spiral pattern persisted. Local visitors noted unusual environmental details. Birds avoided the circular area, and the water inside appeared unusually clear. The Royal Australian Air Force's Intelligence Directorate in Canberra received the case file quickly. Internal documents, declassified decades later, classified the incident as an unidentified aerial object with physical trace evidence. Memoranda described the event as involving a short-duration downward force of unknown origin, creating a distinctive rotational flattening effect. Meteorological explanations were systematically dismissed. Experts concluded that whirlwinds or waterspouts could not produce such a sharply defined, undisturbed perimeter. The final RAF summary succinctly stated the anomaly: no known aircraft movements corresponded with the time and location. While official paperwork processed quietly, public interest surged. Reporters descended on Pedley's farm, photographing both him and the remarkable formation. His account spread rapidly, appearing in Australian newspapers and international publications focused on unexplained aerial phenomena. The Tully Nest incident stands as a significant moment in Australian UFO history. While many UFO reports emerged over the years, this case distinguished itself through its unique characteristics. At Horseshoe Lagoon, a precise spiral appeared in the reeds, directly linked to an eyewitness account by George Pedley. The Victorian Flying Saucer Research Society dispatched investigators to thoroughly examine the site and interview Pedley. They discovered something remarkable. Though similar nest reports existed in the Tully area previously, few matched this incident's direct correlation with an observed aerial object. Pedley remained steadfast in his account. He described seeing an unidentified object rise from the lagoon, leaving behind a distinctive circular pattern in the reeds. While he never claimed to understand the object's origin or nature, he emphasized its extraordinary character, something entirely different from anything he had encountered in his years of working the land. Military and civilian investigators documented the physical evidence carefully. The RAF kept the case in their files, maintaining a cautious official position. They acknowledged both the physical traces and Pedley's credibility without definitively explaining the event's cause. Over time, various theories emerged. Some researchers compared the incident to crop circles, though it predated that phenomenon by more than 10 years. Others speculated about experimental aircraft or atmospheric disturbances, yet no conclusive evidence supported these explanations. Eventually, Horseshoe Lagoon returned to its natural state. The spiral disappeared, and only photographs, measurements, and witness accounts remained, preserving a rare instance of environmental evidence directly linked to a UFO sighting. The enduring mystery continued to intrigue researchers. Why had this object appeared? What purpose did its precise circular mark serve? The lagoon offered no answers, just quiet waters and the lingering memory of an unexplained encounter. A silent signature remained, one that no official explanation could fully erase. The fading light was mirrored in the still water outside Carleton, Quebec, as Sergeant Ken Maud of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police patrolled the shoreline road. Just past the marina, something caught his eye over the water. A bright orange light low in the sky moved at an unusual downward angle. Maud initially thought it might be a small aircraft in trouble. The descent seemed too controlled for an outright crash, yet too steep for a normal landing approach. No engine sound or strobing navigation lights were present, just a steady glow shifting from deep amber to pale gold. As the object neared the bay's surface, about 50 yards offshore, it met the water without explosion or debris scatter. Instead, it appeared to slip beneath the surface in one motion, sending up a short shimmering spray that caught the last light of dusk. Then it vanished from the air. Maud pulled over and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. Out on the water, a diffuse glow shimmered just below the surface. Faint but distinct, it pulsed gently, as if retaining some residual energy. Less than half a mile east, fisherman Andre Lay was returning with his 28-foot trawler after setting lobster pots. He and his deckhand, Michael Roy, witnessed the same orange descent. By the time they reached the spot, the glow was already underwater. Roy later described a faint hissing sound, as though steam was rising, despite the cool night air and calm water. Another RCMP officer, Constable Paul Gong, soon joined Maud. Both men agreed they were observing something underwater that was neither a reflection nor a boat light. Gong contacted the local detachment, emphasizing potential rescue operations if it was an aircraft. The call reached the Canadian Coast Guard station at Point Lacroix, which dispatched the CCGS Captor Spore, a fast-response patrol vessel with a smaller rigid-hull inflatable boat. Darkness had fallen by the time they arrived. Maud remained on shore, tracking the faint underwater glow as it moved slowly toward deeper water. The crew also spotted the diffuse light several meters below the surface, drifting silently with no sign of debris or oil slick. The captain ordered a comprehensive area sweep, and searchlights cut across the water. Sonar scans across the area revealed nothing unusual. The seabed appeared normal, with no large objects or wreckage detected. The Coast Guard search continued for almost 2 hours. A mysterious glow gradually faded until it completely disappeared. At 21:47 hours, they logged the disappearance. No debris found, no distress calls received, and no confirmed missing aircraft. Shortly before midnight, the search was called off. Transport Canada investigated the next morning, contacting both civil and military controllers. No aircraft were reported missing or overdue. The region showed no signs of maritime distress or flare signals. Local newspapers quickly picked up the story, headlines like "Mystery Lights over Baie de Chaleur" and "Coast Guard called for unusual sighting" spread the news. RCMP sources confirmed the lights were witnessed by both officers and civilians. While initial speculation centered on a potential downed aircraft, this theory quickly dissolved with the lack of wreckage. A Tribune reporter interviewed John Paul Sear, a retired mariner who spoke of previous strange light sightings in the bay. "This place has its secrets," he remarked. Local fishermen discussed these occurrences, though rarely documenting them formally. In the weeks following, Canadian UFO researchers sought access to official logs and witness statements. Though no photographs existed, the RCMP duty log for September 4th contained entries from Maud and Gon, describing an anomalous descending light with orange to gold subsurface illumination. The Coast Guard log for Cape Spur noted investigating an area off Carlton per RCMP request. They observed a light source moving slowly underwater towards deeper waters. No debris, oil, or surface disturbance was detected. The source extinguished at approximately 21:47 hours, with the search yielding no results. Andre Lay, the fisherman, spoke to investigators again in 1983. He repeated that his compass had spun erratically during the approach to the glow, and that Michelle Roy had noted a metallic taste in the air. These sensations disappeared after they turned towards shore and the light vanished. This metallic taste detail later intrigued a Montreal-based research group who recognized similar phenomena in their own investigations. In the autumn of a year not too distant, something unusual entered the Gulf of St. Usual. Entered the Gulf of St. Usual. Entered the Gulf of St. Usual. Lawrence, it wasn't a dramatic crash with fire and wreckage, but a silent descent marked by an eerie light. Law enforcement and maritime professionals documented a phenomenon that defied simple explanation. The Baie de Chaleur case, while less famous than Shag Harbor, stood out for its multiple trained witnesses. By 1985, regional UFO catalogs included excerpts from RCMP and Coast Guard logs, all describing the same event with remarkable consistency. Witnesses reported a bright, silent descent into water without any impact explosion. A lingering glow moved slowly underwater before gradually fading away. No physical evidence was ever recovered. Local theories ranged from meteor fragments to disturbed bioluminescent marine life, but none could explain the persistent orange-gold color or the accompanying compass anomaly. Ken Maud, an RCRP sergeant, later shared his perspective in a private interview. "I've seen flares, boat lights in fog, and lightning at sea," he said. This was different. It moved with purpose and didn't behave like anything natural. As years passed, the Baie de Chaleur lights faded from public memory, yet the official records remained quietly preserved in RCMP archives and Coast Guard logbooks. The site itself shows no marks. The tide continues to move in and out. Fishing boats work the bay, and gulls follow their wake. For those who witnessed the event, the memory endures. It remains unclear whether what entered the bay that evening was a malfunctioning craft, a deliberate submersion, or something beyond current technological understanding. What is certain is that it was real to those who watched, including trained observers. In a region where the sea guards its secrets, this was one more unexplained encounter slipping beneath the surface and into the long unsettled ledger of maritime mysteries. In the late summer of 1975, near Lello, Shropshire, England, the morning was calm over low fields. A pale haze clung to the hedges, and the damp grass bore the marks of boots from the previous day. David Henshaw, a 46-year-old livestock farmer, moved through his daily routine. Walking the paddocks, he methodically checked fences, counted animals, and surveyed the perimeter for any signs of trespass or damage. This time of year was typically quiet, with no lambing to disrupt his nights and few visitors beyond occasional delivery trucks, while in the far corner of a grazing field, something caught Henshaw's attention. At first glance, he thought it might be a small van or farm machinery left by a neighbor, but the shape was different. Too compact, too rounded, and oddly balanced on three slender supports. The early light revealed a smooth surface without bolts, panels, or painted markings. Climbing the stile, Henshaw approached the strange object. His boots sank into soft ground, dew still glistening on the pasture. With each step, the object became more peculiar. An oval body, no more than 4 meters across, sat with a low dome on top and a dull metallic sheen. The supports were evenly spaced, pressed into the soil, yet no tire tracks led to the spot. As Henshaw puzzled over its presence, movement caught his eye. Two figures, no taller than his chest, stood near one of the supports. Their close-fitting silvery grey suits clung seamlessly to their frames. Their heads seemed disproportionately large, pale and smooth in a way that made it unclear whether they wore helmets or if that was their actual skin. Suddenly, one figure turned towards Henshaw. In that instant, his body froze. Muscles locked, arms hung uselessly, and even his breathing slowed. This wasn't like fainting or cramping. It felt as though every muscle had been switched off. Yet he remained fully aware. The figures exchanged a glance that seemed like communication, then turned and moved toward the craft. A faint hum rose in the air, accompanied by a slight vibration through the ground. The craft began to lift. The field lay perfectly still. No wind stirred the grass. No dust moved. Suddenly, and Ben Binifitia object rose with complete steadiness, its three supports folding smoothly beneath it. Quickly angling away from the hedgerow, it vanished in seconds, leaving behind only a fading hum. The paralyzing effect lifted, and Henshaw staggered, taking deep breaths to steady himself. Walking toward the spot where the object had rested, he expected scorched earth or disturbed ground. Instead, he discovered three precisely defined impressions in the grass, arranged in a perfect triangle. Each patch was about the size of a dinner plate, with grass flattened and warm to the touch. The soil beneath was compacted hard, with edges so precise that the surrounding grass showed no damage. No footprints marked the area, nor were there any signs of approach. The rest of the pasture remained completely untouched. Henshaw called the local police station, and within an hour, 2 uniformed constables arrived to investigate. They carefully examined the site, noting the triangular layout, identical size and depth of the impressions, and the total lack of disturbance. One constable pressed his boot into nearby soil for comparison, finding it soft and springy, unlike the compressed patches where the object had been. Photographers documented the scene, placing scale markers beside each impression. While the constables couldn't determine a cause, one quietly observed that the marks didn't resemble typical helicopter landing sites from RAF training exercises. That afternoon, a man in plain clothes arrived in a dark saloon car. Introducing himself as working with the Air Ministry, he approached the site with a calm, almost detached demeanor. Henshaw watched as the man meticulously measured the distances between impressions and sketched the triangular pattern. Collecting small soil samples in labeled envelopes, the man photographed the field from multiple angles. He asked Henshaw about any aircraft sounds before or after the sighting. When Henshaw mentioned only a faint hum from the object itself, the man simply nodded, made a final note, and departed. In the following days, the flattened grass began to lift, though the soil remained notably compressed. Notably encounter. Rain couldn't wash away the impressions, which remained hard and defined. Puddles formed differently across the site, water beating against the ground rather than absorbing. Neighbors visited, noting the sharp edges of the marks and how the surrounding grass stayed pristine. Though no official statement emerged from the police or Air Ministry, Henshaw learned through a parish council contact that the incident was logged as an unidentified aerial object with physical traces. A regional UFO research group soon arrived, conducting lengthy interviews and collecting soil samples. Their subsequent report mentioned minor chemical changes in the compacted soil, carefully noting these were not harmful. The incident received only a brief mention in the local Shropshire Star, which suited Henshaw perfectly. He had no desire to invite ridicule and kept his account consistent when occasionally shared. The craft had been silent except for a low hum, its movements calculated and deliberate. Two figures appeared purposeful but not threatening. Over time, researchers recognized similarities with other British close encounters from the 1970s. Small craft, humanoid occupants, triangular landing marks, and quiet official interest. With the Ministry of Defence's UFO desk still active in Whitehall, many such cases were confidentially examined and filed away. By the following spring, the field showed no trace. Grass had regrown, soil had softened, and livestock grazed where the mysterious event had occurred. The impressions survived only in photographs and archived documents. For Henshaw, the memory remained vivid. He could recall the exact tilt of the craft's rise, its landing support layout, and the surreal, weightless sensation that had enveloped him. No words were exchanged, no warning given, just a sudden, unfamiliar presence and its equally abrupt departure. In the broader narrative of rural British UFO encounters, this event was one of many understated incidents. An ordinary witness, tangible evidence, quiet official investigation, and no conclusive explanation. The morning faded into memory, but the unanswered questions remained as persistent as the marks had once been in the Shropshire grass. The warm, still August air hung over rural Kentucky, with crickets weaving their nice symphony across open fields at the edges of Kelly. A small farming community, a white wooden farmhouse, stood quietly among pastures and scattered trees. Inside, a group of Sewell, On and Taylor family members and friends gathered for what seemed like an ordinary summer evening. Billy Ray Taylor, visiting from Pennsylvania, went outside to draw water from Hee Well. While crossing Hee Yard, he spotted something remarkable in Hee western sky, a bright silvery object moving silently, descending in a low arc towards Hee distant reline. Its glow remained steady and its movement smooth, making no sound above Hee chorus of insects. Watching Hee object vanish beyond Hee Rees, Billy Ray hurried back inside to share his observation. Initially, Hee family remained skeptical, believing Hee Nye was calm and unremarkable. However, Hee dogs soon began barking sharply, compelling several people to peer of Hee windows. A faint glow emerged from Hee dark fields, drawing some family members on Hee porch. Suddenly, a small figure appeared from Hee shadows, no more than 3½ feet tall, with an oversized rounded head and large luminous eyes. Long arms nearly touched. Hee ground ending in alarm-like fingers. A metallic sheen caught Whaley light existed, while Shaw hin legs moved in a slow, deliberate glide. Startled by Hee inexplicable presence, Hee group quickly retreated inside and locked Hee door. Hee men grabbed a shotgun and .22 rifle, positioning themselves near Hee windows. When one of Hee beings approached close-o, Hee porch steps, a shoe rang Hee small figure flipped backward, seemed to flow out gracefully. He ground before swiftly disappearing into a darkness. A noise from Hee roof drew their Enton. Billy Ray looked up. I see another figure peering over Hee eaves, its glowing eyes fixed directly on him. He fired again, bumpy figure vanished. Moments later, I appeared a side window. Another shoe was fired, and again Hee being disappeared, only to reappear from a different direction. For Hee next 2 or 3 hours, Hee being circled Hee sows, moving seamlessly from window, roof of fence line. Their movements remained smooth and fluid, defying any familiar power of human locomotion. The farmhouse was eerily quiet, broken only by the occasional scrape of claws on wood or tin. Beings glided silently over the ground, leaving no trace. Family members kept weapons ready and lights on, watching from different vantage points. Their most striking feature was unmistakable: bright, reflective eyes that caught the lamplight. When the visits became less frequent, the family seized the moment. They drove 2 cars into nearby Hopkinsville and approached local law enforcement. Their serious demeanor and consistent story prompted an immediate investigation. Soon the property was surrounded by local police, state troopers, a sheriff, and military police from Fort Campbell. They combed the grounds meticulously, searching fields and examining the house with flashlights. Though they found spent shell casings, bullet holes in window frames, and roof scratches, no footprints or tracks were discovered. Despite the dry, firm ground, officers interviewed witnesses separately. Each description was remarkably uniform. Small beings with large heads, luminous eyes, long arms, and a metallic sheen. These creatures moved deliberately and silently, seeming more curious than threatening. They approached repeatedly without attempting to force entry. Police remained until daylight. Just before departing, one creature was spotted near the tree line. Its metallic reflection was still visible in the morning light, but it quickly retreated into the woods. News spread rapidly. Reporters descended on the farm, dubbing it the Hopkinsville Goblins case, a name the witnesses resented. Skeptics suggested misidentified great horned owls, pointing to glowing eyes and silent movement. Supporters countered that owls couldn't explain the being's size, metallic appearance, apparent resistance to gunfire, or coordinated movements. Researchers continued studying the case for years, intrigued by its unusual characteristics. This was no brief encounter, but a prolonged event lasting hours, witnessed by multiple people from different locations around the house. Project Blue Book declined to investigate, as no conventional aircraft was reported. Neighbors either avoided them or came out of sheer curiosity. Strangers constantly visited their property, hoping to catch a glimpse of something unusual. Eventually, life returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of that night remained etched in their minds. Today, the landscape has changed. The farmhouse is gone, replaced by open ground, fences have shifted, but the area remains quiet. Those who heard the story directly from the witnesses found the details remarkably consistent. Small beings with luminous eyes and metallic skin moved with precise movements around the farmhouse deep in rural Kentucky. The reason for their visit remains a mystery. Were they simply curious? Perhaps whatever Billy Ray saw descending behind the trees brought them. They left without causing significant harm, leaving only a few scratches and bullet holes, a restraint that only deepened the intrigue. The encounter is now remembered as much for the witnesses as for the beings themselves, a group of ordinary people whose accounts have remained unchanged for decades. In the stillness of a Kentucky summer night, the story begins to unfold. A trip to the well, a light in the sky, and a moment when the familiar boundaries of home dissolved into something inexplicable. A night when the extraordinary brushed against the ordinary, leaving questions that would persist for years to come. The simple truth remains: something happened, something that defied explanation. It was recounted with unwavering consistency by those who experienced it firsthand. Neither here's the rewritten version. A metallic disc descended silently through the grey winter atmosphere. No engine noise, no rotor blades, no rushing wind accompanied its arrival. It was a perfectly steady glow, self-contained and brilliant. At treetop height, the object hung motionless, no larger than a small car, its surface reflecting a dull, silvery sheen. Suddenly, a white light shaft beamed down, striking Vilio directly. He froze, not by choice but because his body simply stopped responding. Later, Vilio would describe a bizarre sensation, as if someone had switched off his muscles. An intense, penetrating heat enveloped him, not like a fire's warmth, but something seeming to originate from within, and without simultaneously. His vision blurred, and a metallic taste filled his mouth. Nearby, Hano watched, untouched by the beam but close enough to witness Vilio's expression, a complex mix of shock, strain, and profound confusion. Though the entire encounter lasted mere seconds, perhaps a minute, both men would later agree that time felt stretched and distorted. As abruptly as it began, the beam retracted. The disc tilted slightly, then shot upward into the low cloud cover, vanishing without trace. Only a faint rush of displaced air broke the surrounding silence. Vilio's legs gave way, and he collapsed into the snow. Hano helped him sit upright. His companion's breathing was rapid, his skin flushed. Weakness, dizziness, and a strange burning sensation in his face and hands overwhelmed him. A sharp chemical smell hung in the cold air. Hano would later describe it as a sulfur and ozone mixture. They decided to return to town, moving slowly due to Vilio's labored, stiff skiing. By the time they reached home, darkness had fully settled. That evening, Vilio's condition deteriorated. His face became puffy, eyes bloodshot, with skin mottled in patches as if mildly burned, and Hano and Vilio, two men on a ski expedition, found themselves in an extraordinary encounter that soon caught the attention of local authorities and UFO researchers. After their experience, both men reported unusual physical symptoms and described a remarkable event. In the days following the incident, Vilio developed a persistent headache and unquenchable thirst. His companion Hano experienced mild eye irritation that subsided after a few hours. Concerned about their experience, they reported the incident to local police. The next day, law enforcement officers investigated the site. They found the snow largely undisturbed, with only the men's ski tracks visible. A significant detail emerged at the exact spot where Vilio had been standing, a shallow depression in a neat circular pattern of loose snow. Notably, there were no animal tracks, machinery marks, or fallen branches and debris. Finnish Defense Forces personnel discreetly inquired about the incident. No aircraft had been reported in the area that day, and weather conditions were stable. Overcast skies with light winds, and no electrical storms that might explain unusual atmospheric phenomena. Medical examinations in Heinola and Helsinki revealed intriguing findings. Doctors noted symptoms consistent with intense heat or radiation exposure, skin redness, mild swelling, elevated blood pressure, and general fatigue. While no burns or blisters were present, skin discoloration persisted for days. Blood tests showed no severe abnormalities, and most symptoms subsided within 2 weeks. Though Viljo reported lingering fatigue, Hanno's experience was primarily psychological. In interviews with police and UFO researchers, he consistently described a smooth metallic disc with no visible seams or markings, featuring a bright, concentrated light beam underneath. His testimony aligned perfectly with Viljo's account. Civilian investigators from the Finnish UFO Research Association arrived quickly. They treated the case as one of their most compelling close encounters. Thoroughly documenting the site, they photographed the snow disturbance and took separate statements from both men. The statements matched closely, even in minute details like the craft's departure angle and an unusual residual smell. Speculation grew among researchers and locals in the following weeks. Some suggested the men had encountered an experimental Soviet drone or reconnaissance craft. Not given the UFO encounter's location in Finland and the Cold War tensions of that era, the incident stood out for its unique characteristics. Finnish UFO researchers have long considered this case one of the country's best documented close encounters. Two experienced outdoorsmen, Viljo and Hanno, encountered something extraordinary on a winter day in 1970. Unlike many UFO reports, their experience happened in daylight on open ground, which made misidentification of common aerial objects less probable. By mid-1970, the incident had been discussed in UFO periodicals across Europe. The Finnish Defense Forces offered no official statement beyond confirming that no known aircraft were in the area at the time. The police file was quietly closed without explanation after a short period. Both witnesses remained consistent in their account throughout their lives, never embellishing their original story. The encounter involved a mysterious beam that had immediate physical effects. While other similar reports from the late 1960s and early 1970s described temporary paralysis and localized heating, this case was distinguished by the witnesses' credibility and health. Viljo returned to work after several weeks but avoided skiing on that part of the lake for months. Hanno continued his hobby but admitted to watching the sky more carefully. What made the incident most intriguing was the seemingly selective nature of the beam. Viljo was particularly unsettled by the fact that it had singled him out, affecting him while leaving Hanno untouched. Neither man could explain why this happened. The questions lingered. Was this a deliberate act of observation, a scanning process, or something entirely unknown? Today, Lake Timor remains as quiet as it was that winter day. Cross-country skiers still race the frozen edges. The snow lies deep in January, and the pale sun struggles to break through the clouds. No trace remains on the ground of what happened in 1970, but the accounts of Viljo and Hanno have endured in Finnish archives and international UFO literature. The case invites no easy answers, only the haunting image of a silent disk, a shaft of light, and a frozen moment when an ordinary winter outing transformed into something extraordinary. On New Year's Eve, 1978, a routine flight along New Zealand's South Island took an unexpected turn. A Safe Air Argosy cargo aircraft was making its southbound journey toward Christchurch, a route well known to its crew. But this night was different. On board were not just the pilots, but a television news team. Reporter Dennis Grant, cameraman Quentin Fogarty, and sound operator Ingrid McGee were investigating a series of recent aerial sightings along the coast. They had set up cameras in the rear cabin, hoping to document the night sky, never anticipating they would capture something extraordinary. Captain Bill Startup, an experienced pilot with both commercial and military background, was at the controls. First Officer Bob Gard managed navigation and radio traffic. Their flight proceeded normally until something caught Startup's attention. A light appeared low on the horizon, brighter than a star and unnaturally steady. It wasn't a fishing boat's glow or a navigation beacon's blink. As the Argosy advanced, the light kept pace. Startup pointed it out to Gard, who also saw it. They contacted Wellington Air Traffic Control for a radar check. The controller's response was surprising. Radar confirmed an unknown contact exactly where the pilots described, holding position alongside the aircraft. In the cabin, Fogarty adjusted his camera, pressing it to the window. Through his lens, the light sometimes appeared as a perfect white sphere, other times stretching into an ellipse with a faint halo. The object maintained its position for several minutes, its brightness constant. Then, without warning, it surged forward. Its acceleration was smooth and deliberate, moving ahead of the Argosy and well in front of their flight path. It descended briefly toward the ocean before rising again, a movement that defied conventional explanation. Two distinct lights appeared, first one and then another, catching the attention of the flight crew. The initial radar contact confirmed a large object had just performed the maneuver the pilots described. The second light emerged from the water's darkness, smaller but equally bright. At its closest point, it was just over a mile away, so intense that its glow illuminated the cockpit edges and faintly reflected off the instrument panels. Pilots Startup and Guard exchanged knowing glances. In thousands of flight hours between them, they had never witnessed anything like this. From the cabin, the news team continued filming, battling the challenges of night photography through aircraft glass. Their footage would later reveal glowing forms that pulsed, changed shape, and sometimes appeared surrounded by a diffuse haze. These lights behaved unlike any conventional aircraft. They would vanish from view, only to reappear miles away, sometimes pacing the aircraft, sometimes darting ahead or to one side. Radar operators confirmed each appearance, their scopes showing sudden accelerations and abrupt stops impossible for standard aircraft. After landing, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The crew, journalists, and air traffic controllers knew they had experienced something remarkable. Footage reels were immediately secured, with prints being developed within hours. The Royal New Zealand Air Force was informed the next day, taking the report seriously given recent area sightings. Officers were quickly dispatched to interview everyone involved: pilots, news crew, and radar operators in Wellington and Christchurch. They requested comprehensive documentation, raw film, radar logs, and flight positional data. Startup and Guard described the objects as large, intensely bright, and capable of rapid omnidirectional movement. They emphasized the object's lack of navigation lights or transponder signals, and noted the maneuvers were far too controlled to be natural phenomena or drifting balloons. The television crew's testimony precisely matched the pilot's accounts. Quentin Fogarty described the difficulty of keeping the lights in focus due to their unpredictable movements, while simultaneously noting their overwhelming brightness. Dennis Gran confirmed the lights never resembled ordinary aircraft, highlighting their sudden accelerations and sharp directional changes. Air traffic controllers provided equally compelling evidence, completing a comprehensive account of this extraordinary encounter. An unusual event unfolded on December 31, 1978, when multiple witnesses observed mysterious lights in the skies near Kikora. The incident began when an aircraft tracked an unknown object for nearly 20 minutes before it suddenly vanished. In Christchurch, radar and visual observations detected multiple returns in the approach corridor, appearing and disappearing in sync with the pilot's reports. The Royal New Zealand Air Force, RNZAF, thoroughly investigated the case. Photographic analysts examining the film concluded that the changing light shapes were consistent with genuine source variations, ruling out camera or lens effects. Weather data showed no atmospheric conditions that could explain the simultaneous radar and visual observations. The RNZF's internal summary documented multiple visual and radar contacts by trained personnel. No known aircraft movements were recorded in the area during the relevant times, and the observed performance exceeded conventional aviation capabilities. This incident wasn't isolated. Just 10 days earlier, on December 21st, another air team had reported bright unexplained lights along the same route, also tracked on radar. This previous sighting had actually prompted a television crew to join the New Year's Eve flight, which ultimately produced the now famous footage. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Newspaper headlines blared about the Kikora UFOs, and television broadcasts aired segments of strange lights dancing over the Black Sea. Skeptics proposed various explanations, from Venus to fishing vessels to aircraft deck reflections, but these struggled against the combined witness testimony and radar evidence tracking objects moving independently in open airspace. In the months following the event, the footage circulated among researchers across Australia, the United States, and Europe. Many considered it one of the strongest UFO cases of the late 20th century, not because the light's nature was understood, but because of the rare combination of trained visual witnesses, multiple radar confirmations, and professional film recording. While occasional reports emerged from Kikura in subsequent years, none matched the original incident's compelling evidence. The night became a fixed memory, a routine flight transformed into an unexplained phenomenon. Eventually, the coastline returned to its usual quiet, leaving behind a mystery that continued to intrigue researchers and the public alike. But on that New Year's Eve, those in the Argus cabin and cockpit held a memory that would endure in New Zealand's aviation history. Bright maneuvering objects had paced their aircraft, and radar had confirmed their presence. Decades later, the Kura lights remain as unexplained as they were that night, bright points against a dark sky moving with a purpose known only to themselves. The film, logs and interviews are still preserved, each piece of evidence reinforcing the others. Far from New Zealand, in August 1966, another mysterious encounter unfolded near Lake Tanganyika. The southern end of the lake stretched endlessly, its surface a muted silver blue under the mid-morning sun. Fishing villages along the shore woke early, their rhythms tied to the lake's moods. John Moore, a 34-year-old fisherman from a small settlement west of Mapulondu, was rowing back with his cousin Daniel after checking their gill nets. The air was still, the lake surface almost glass-like. Suddenly, a flash of brightness caught John's eye, low on the water and slightly to the north. At first, it seemed like a reflection. The flash came again, more sustained, as if a solid shape was catching the sun. Daniel noticed it too. "Not a boat," he said quietly, shading his eyes. A pale, metallic-looking object, oval in shape, glinted in the sunlight. No mast, no wake, no engine sound. The object began moving toward them, smooth and deliberate, covering distance without visible propulsion. As it drew closer, John estimated it to be around 20 feet long with a central dome-like rise. Sunlight caught its surface in a dull silvery sheen, not like polished metal, but more like something coated or matte. When it was perhaps 200 meters away, the two men drifted, watching in silence. The water beneath rippled in an odd circular pattern, radiating outward in even rings. A faint hum, low and steady, lingered just on the edge of hearing. The object slowed and hovered in place. Without warning, it descended to touch the lake's surface. The ripples intensified but didn't break into splashes. The craft settled onto the water lightly, like a leaf landing. John and Daniel exchanged a look. Neither had witnessed anything remotely similar before. They began paddling slowly toward it, a growing unease building between them. When they were still a good 100 meters away, the hum rose sharply in pitch. The object lifted from the water in a smooth vertical ascent, climbing to perhaps 30 meters above the lake before angling sharply upward and accelerating away at high speed. Within seconds, it was gone. As the last traces of sound faded, the men noticed the water where it had been sitting. The circular ripples continued spreading, but within the center of the disturbance, the water looked unnaturally clear, as if something had displaced the silt and left a visible column beneath the surface. By the time John and Daniel reached shore, word had already started to spread. Other fishermen along the shore had seen at least part of the event, though most had only caught the latter moments, the hovering or rapid ascent. The local police in Mulongu were notified that afternoon. Sergeant Elias Chanda, the duty officer, took statements from both men and recorded rough sketches of the object based on their descriptions. The report was typed up in triplicate. One copy kept at the local post, another sent to the provincial office in Casamar, and a third forwarded to Lusaka. A week later, two officials from the Northern Rhodesian Department of Civil Aviation arrived in Mulongu. They introduced themselves quietly, made notes from the police file, and conducted their own interviews with John, Daniel, and 3 other fishermen who claimed to have seen the object from a distance. The officials also visited the part of the lake where the sighting had occurred, though they did not disclose any conclusions before leaving. In October of that year, a short memorandum referencing the Mulongu incident was sent to the British Colonial Office in London. The memo, later found in declassified archives, described the witnesses as credible, experienced watermen, and the object as unidentified with no corresponding aviation or maritime traffic recorded at the time. It recommended that the file be kept, and along the shores of a tranquil lake, a moment of extraordinary observation became part of local whispers. Fishermen spoke quietly at the market or after their fishing trips, sharing an encounter that defied explanation. John, a man intimately familiar with the lake's rhythms, its weather shifts, fish behaviors, and light patterns, found himself confronting something completely outside his lifetime of understanding. Months passed after the sighting, and life gradually returned to normal. The initial ripples of excitement began to fade from memory. Years later, a visiting researcher from South Africa uncovered the incident while examining police archives in Casamar. Tracking down John, who still lived near Mapelongo, the researcher found his recollection remarkably consistent. Every detail remained unchanged: the shape, movement, sound, and the peculiar absence of visible propulsion. In 2005, when British Colonial Office archives were digitized, the incident resurfaced. A short memorandum included original police sketches, slightly yellowed with age, depicting an oval-shaped object with a dome. A handwritten note in the margin read simply, "No match. Leave unresolved." The Lake Tangana sighting never made headlines beyond its immediate region. It remained tucked away in an obscure file, known primarily to those who study such events closely. Yet it stands as one of the few African UFO cases from that period documented through both local witness accounts and formal government channels. For those familiar with the lake, the idea of something appearing silently over its waters, leaving nothing behind but memory, carries a quiet resonance. The fishermen who witnessed the event never sought attention or demanded answers. They simply described what happened and left the rest to officials. Decades later, the lake remains unchanged. Morning light still catches on ripples that play tricks on the eyes. Somewhere in a locked cabinet, an old manila folder holds a simple unresolved account. Two fishermen, a strange craft, and a moment when Tangana's familiar surface reflected something entirely unknown. The night flight from Mocha to Tenerife was supposed to be routine, but something unexpected was about to unfold. The weather was clear and calm over the Mediterranean, with the jet's engines providing a steady background hum. Captain Francisco Javier Lado de Tijara, an experienced pilot with Transport Aéreo Español TAI, was midway through his day's journey on flight JK297. The Super Caravel SC-210 carried 109 passengers, cruising smoothly through the darkness. Suddenly, two bright red lights appeared off the starboard side. Initially distant, they began moving toward the aircraft at an unusual speed. These lights didn't resemble any known air traffic navigation markers. Their intensity and color were distinctly different from commercial or private aircraft. As the captain and crew exchanged concerned glances, they realized this was not part of their flight plan or visible on the radar display. A quick communication with Barcelona Air Control confirmed no other aircraft were in the sector. Yet the mysterious lights continued closing in, maintaining a parallel altitude. The approach became too direct to ignore. Captain Liardo decided to take evasive action, slightly changing course to test the lights' behavior. They matched every maneuver, maintaining their relative position. With a potential collision risk and no identification from air traffic control, he informed passengers they would divert to Valencia Airport for technical, precautionary reasons. This moment marked an unprecedented event in Spanish civil aviation history, the first time a commercial airliner altered course and prepared to land because of an unidentified aerial object. As the aircraft descended, the lights continued following, shifting position but never completely disappearing. Crew members later described the objects as having a steady, unusual intensity without typical aircraft light flickering. They appeared more like luminous spheres than defined craft. Ground staff at Valencia also observed these unusual lights, with some noting independent movement and others reporting they seemed to track the incoming aircraft's path. By the time the jet landed safely, the objects had moved further away but had not vanished entirely. The incident prompted a military response. Los Llanos Air Base in Albite scrambled two Mirage F-1 fighter jets to investigate the mysterious aerial phenomenon. Captain Fernando Camora's mission seemed straightforward at first: intercept and identify an unusual aerial object. Civil aviation authorities and the radar station at Torre del Dardo near Madrid had reported a sighting, providing coordinates for the Mirage's flight. Shortly after takeoff, Camora encountered a strange phenomenon. A bright, luminous shape appeared in the distance, its appearance shifting between intense white and reddish hues. Each time the fighter jet approached, the object would accelerate beyond the Mirage's maximum speed capabilities. Radar contact was fleeting, brief locks followed by sudden disappearances. The object's movement defied conventional understanding. It would change altitude dramatically, rising thousands of feet in mere seconds, then hover motionlessly before accelerating again. Multiple interception attempts yielded the same result: brief radar contact, unexpected maneuvers, and rapid vanishing. After an hour of unsuccessful pursuit, fuel constraints forced Kimura to return to base. Meanwhile, reports emerged from Spain's eastern coast describing similar strange light phenomena over the sea. Some lights moved at high speeds, while others remained stationary for extended periods before fading. No conventional aircraft or flight plans could explain these observations. The Spanish Air Force launched a formal investigation. Within days, a comprehensive report was compiled, later known as Expediente Mantis. Investigators gathered statements from military personnel, air traffic controllers, ground witnesses, and pilots involved in the intercept. Radar logs from multiple stations were cross-referenced and analyzed. The report's findings were striking. Flight JK-297's diversion was confirmed to be prompted by an unidentified aerial phenomenon presenting a potential collision risk. Military analysis emphasized the object's extraordinary flight characteristics: sudden accelerations, rapid altitude changes, and the ability to maintain stationary positions without apparent propulsion. Public interest escalated quickly as news outlets learned of the incident. Spanish newspapers began publishing headlines about mysterious lights, forcing emergency actions, transforming a military investigation into a national conversation about unexplained aerial phenomena, particularly among aviation experts and former military officers on television programs. Trained professionals, pilots, radar operators, and air traffic controllers lent credibility to the event, their reputations adding weight to the account. For the passengers, details emerged gradually after the fact. During the actual diversion, they were simply told it was a routine precaution. Later, many expressed surprise upon learning that an unidentified aerial object, tracked by both civilian and military authorities, was the underlying cause. The Spanish Ministry of Defense's public statement was measured and careful. They acknowledged observing an unidentified object of unknown origin, offering no explanation and finding no evidence of military or civilian aircraft intrusion. Subsequent research into the Expedient Mantis files revealed meticulous documentation. The case stood out not just for the passenger flight diversion, but for the immediate and coordinated involvement of civil and military authorities. It became a reference point in European UFO studies, demonstrating an alignment of safety protocols, official reports, and multiple witness testimonies. Captain Leonardo Deada's response remained professional. In interviews, he plainly stated that his decision to divert was based solely on passenger safety and the inability to identify the approaching objects. He emphasized that these were not imaginary or atmospheric illusions, but visible, tangible entities tracked on radar. Mirage pilot Captain Fernando Camara later expressed frustration at being unable to close the distance. "I could do things no aircraft I know can do," he stated, adding weight to the military's assessment of unconventional flight capabilities. Despite extensive data collection, the official conclusion remained unresolved. The files, partially declassified years later, provided no new explanation. To this day, the Expedient Mantis case remains open-ended, a rare instance in aviation history where a UFO encounter directly and verifiably impacted flight operations. No, over decades later, witnesses still recall a night that defied explanation. An incident in Spain's skies would become a benchmark for UFO researchers, highlighting how the unknown can intrude into even the most routine moments. On April 25, 1978, Puerto Montt was experiencing a clear, cool morning. At the local airbase, routine flight exercises were preparing to launch. Lieutenant Oscar Santamaria Huerta, a 23-year-old Chilean Air Force pilot, was assigned to fly a Hawker Hunter jet that day, expecting nothing more than a standard training run. Everything changed when the control tower reported an identified aerial object approaching the restricted zone. Radar operators confirmed a contact that didn't resemble any known aircraft. It was a round, white shape, hovering at about 2,000 meters, stationary and unexplained. No scheduled weather balloon launches could account for the object. Huerta received orders to intercept. He quickly climbed into his jet and roared skyward, tracking the object's coordinates. Initial visual contact revealed a bright spherical shape, reflecting the morning sunlight. As he drew closer, the object's metallic features became increasingly distinct. The Mediterranean calm, sudden brilliant lights, urgent diversions, and failed diversions and failed interception attempts created a multi-layered record difficult to dismiss. Beyond the fastest jet's reach, the object left no trace on the sea below, only memories of lights that forced an airliner off course and drew an entire nation's aviation network's attention. More than a file entry in Expediente Mans, this incident endures through the quiet conviction of those who witnessed something real, uninvited, and utterly unlike anything they had encountered before. The Puerto Montt UFO chase became a testament to an unexplained aerial encounter that challenged understanding. It hovered perfectly still in the sky, a smooth, unmarked sphere with no visible wings, seams, or propellers. When he reached firing range, he engaged his Hawker Hunter's 30mm cannon, unleashing 64 high-explosive shells toward the object. The rounds struck the sphere, creating tiny impact flashes across its surface. Yet nothing changed. No damage, no smoke, no shift in position. The object remained completely unaffected, as if the shells were mere raindrops. Suddenly, the sphere began moving. It ascended rapidly, angling away from the base and climbing at a speed far beyond any conventional aircraft. Huerta pursued, but the object's movement defied normal flight patterns. It would dart upward, drop slightly, then stop midair, each maneuver abrupt and controlled. Sometimes it seemed to be playing a calculated game, allowing Huerta to get close before accelerating away. Radar operators tracked the chase intermittently, with the object's signal vanishing and reappearing unpredictably. Ground personnel watched through binoculars, witnessing two specks weaving across the sky. From every vantage point, the description remained consistent. This was an object moving in ways no standard aircraft could replicate. For nearly 10 minutes, Huerta pushed his Hawker Hunter to its limits. The object climbed to around 10,000 meters in mere seconds, forcing Huerta to level off as it remained just out of reach. With fuel running low, Huerta was ordered to disengage. The object did not follow him back, but continued climbing until it vanished from sight. Upon landing, Huerta was immediately debriefed by commanding officers and intelligence personnel. His account was detailed and consistent, both in the initial interview and the written statement he provided later that day. Radar records and ground observations confirmed key aspects of his extraordinary encounter. The Chilean Air Force compiled a comprehensive report in the days following the incident. Witness statements from radar operators, control tower staff, and base personnel were meticulously documented. No civilian or military flights had matched the object's position or movement during the time of the encounter, and local meteorological officials confirmed that winds at altitude did not align with the object's stationary position. The object was officially logged as an unidentified aerial contact. Intelligence officers explored the possibility of a foreign reconnaissance device, but noted that its flight characteristics, abrupt stops, extreme accelerations, and rapid climbs were incompatible with any known technology of the era. The report was subsequently shared with international aviation safety authorities and allied military contacts. While the official summary avoided speculation about extraterrestrial origins, it clearly stated that the object's behavior defied known aerodynamic principles. Press coverage remained limited. Regional newspapers briefly covered the unidentified object over Puerto Montt and the military's interception attempt, while national media maintained a restrained approach, likely influenced by the Air Force's low-key handling of the details. The public was simply informed that an unknown object had entered restricted airspace before departing at high altitude. Among UFO researchers, the Puerto Montt chase became a significant case. It joined a select group of military encounters involving a pilot firing on an unidentified object in daylight, with multiple witnesses and radar confirmation. Comparisons were drawn to the 1948 Gorman dogfight and the 1976 Thiron incident, both involving skilled pilots and unidentified test craft, displaying extraordinary maneuverability. Years later, Ware would describe the event as one of the most perplexing experiences of his career. It was not a balloon, it was not an aircraft as we know them, he recalled. It reacted to my presence and my actions. I was trained to identify and, if necessary, destroy hostile targets. Else, the case remains open in Chilean Air Force archives. While some portions of the file have been declassified, critical materials such as radar logs and internal analysis remain unreleased. Officially, the incident is listed as unresolved. The Portman chase lingers in memory not because it offers an explanation, but because it so completely defies one. A pilot encountered an object at close range, firing cannon rounds and pursuing it through a series of impossible maneuvers. Yet he could only watch as the object departed without showing any sign of damage. Official inquiries invariably reached the same impasse. The object could not be explained by the technology or understanding of its time. It remains an entry in records and in the memories of those who witnessed it, a moment when a skilled pilot found himself suspended in the sky, confronting something that exceeded the limits of his aircraft and perhaps even human engineering capabilities. In the quiet aftermath, as the base settled back into its routine, no certainty remained about what had been seen. The only unshakable fact was that something had indeed been present. You've reached the end of Volume 5 of Fall Asleep to the Unheard. Which story stayed with you tonight? When you wake, share it in the comments. We're always reading. Until next time, sleep well and dream of disclosure.